All the cheaters, identify yourself. She's not out here. My wife. If you play a board game with my wife, she is a cheat. Welcome to 2025, everybody. We have made it 5 whole days into 2025. Hopefully catastrophe is not struck for anybody just yet. Kind of crazy to think that we are now closer to 2050 than to 2000. I mean, 5 days closer, but still closer to 2050. And if you're in my age demographic, 2000 doesn't seem like that long ago. But here we go. We are into that new year refresh, reset, recalibrate mode. I know that some of you are not resolution setters, and that's fine. That's fine. Now, some of you think, hey, look, it's just another day of our life, arbitrarily set by humans at some point in the past that this would be the new year. I get it. All of that's true. You can set goals anytime you want. You know, March, April, June. You can set goals anytime you want. You can reassess any time of the year that you want, but most of us give at least a few seconds during this time of the year to kind of recalibrate a little bit, reassess. What would we like to go better in the coming year? Well, maybe what didn't go so well in 2024 and what we would like to go a little bit better in 2025. And I want to help with that. I want to just give you some things to think about over the next couple of weeks when it comes to assessing the last year and kind of prioritizing what's going to happen in this new year. And I want to do it through the lens of the games we play. Most of us, probably all of us, grew up playing board games. They're all going to be board games. And this is a great time of year for board games. Number one, because maybe somebody in your family got a board game for Christmas, and so it's new and it's fresh, and you're learning a brand new board game. Number two, because we're all out of money and board games are free, right? That's another great reason. Board games are awesome the first of the year, but we're going to kind of take the theme of some of the board games most of us have played, and then look at what that has to teach us, to say to us about getting ready for this new year. We're going to start with Trivial Pursuit. I have here the classic edition. Now there are more than 100 different editions of Trivial Pursuit. You can get Star Wars edition, you can get Star Trek edition, you can get the Harry Potter edition, you get the Friends TV show edition. You can get the Marvel Cinematic Universe edition, all kind of editions. I have the classic edition, the circle with the spokes, and you're going to move around the circle forwards or backwards, but not forwards and backwards in the same roll, unless you're a cheater. And then you have the spokes. You're going to go up and down, and you're going to answer questions, like that's the whole game. You're going to answer questions. In the classic editions, the questions are around geography, entertainment, history, art and literature, science and nature, sports and leisure. For example, this question: in which 80s classic does Matthew Broderick tell us life moves pretty fast? If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. There we go. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Do I know you or not? Yes. Now, I think we're a pretty smart church, but I ask that one because I don't think we would get any of the rest of these. So we're going to quit while we're ahead. Right? We don't want to feel bad about ourselves at the beginning of the year. If you played the game, you know you get a little game piece like this. You move it around the board, and you fill in the game piece by answering questions, right? The goal is to get to the wedge space so that if you get that particular answer correctly, then you get the wedge for that particular color, and you just insert it right inside your game piece. And the goal then is to fill up your game piece and then go back to the center of the spokes, answer one final question, and then you're the winner. Now, if there is a complaint about this game, I think I know what it is. Some of you hate this game. And you hate this game because it feels like the object of the game is to have your mind filled with meaningless information. Like that's how you win this game. You win this game by having your mind filled with completely useless information that could never possibly do you any good. Now, the truth of the matter may be you just didn't pay attention in history and geography, and that makes you mad. Right? That makes you mad because you didn't pay attention and now you don't know the answers. But I would say you do have a point. Right? It is in the game. It is in the name of the game. Trivial Pursuit. The pursuit of the trivial. The pursuit of the meaningless. The pursuit of the boring. The pursuit of things that just don't matter, which is the warning. This is the warning as we go into 2025. You're going to fill up your life with a lot of pieces in 2025. You're going to go forward and backward and up and down, and you're going to fill in pieces with your time, with your effort, with your energy, with your focus. Like this whole year, you're going to try out 360 more days. And for 360 more days, you're going to pick up little pieces. And some of them you're going to do consciously and intentionally. The other alternative is you're going to pick them up subconsciously by default. Just by default, just going along with life, just keeping up with the calendar, you're still filling in pieces in your life. And those pieces are determining, reflecting what is most important to you in 2025. And here's my challenge. Spend the next 360 days on things that really matter. Spend the next 360 days on things that are not trivial. Each piece that you add, let it count for eternity. Let it count for things that matter. Here's what is true. Think about it for just a minute. A year is never made up of a year, which is a weird thing to say. I know it's a weird way to say it. A year is never made up of a year. When I say think about 2024, you don't think about one thing, because 2024 was not one thing. Now, maybe there's some bigger pieces. Maybe there were some pronounced parts of 2024 that kind of provide a theme over 2024. But a year is never a year. It's never one big chunk. It's never just this. A year is made up of small moments and choices. So, small moments, small wedges, small pieces in your life and in my life that you're adding every day, you're adding every minute, you're adding every second, one at a time, a day at a time, a choice at a time, decision at a time, focusing your energy one thing at a time, day after day after day. 2025 is going to be the same way. It's not going to be one thing. It's not going to be this big chunk. Again, bigger pieces, more important pieces, more time-consuming pieces, all of that's true. But ultimately, 2025 is going to be a series of choices that you make day after day after day after day. And you know this is true. I'm just here to remind you as we get started, it's always possible to prioritize the unimportant. Always possible. As a matter of fact, it is often easy to prioritize the unimportant. To allow the unimportant to become first, to kind of take over, to occupy the priority place and places in our lives. As we're getting ready for the next 360 days, 2025, here's my challenge. Let's give up some trivial pursuits. And let's choose instead to put into our lives the pursuit of things that matter the most. There's an Old Testament story. It gives us a great warning about this choosing. It's found in Genesis chapter 25. Some of you, because I've seen you post it on Facebook, some of you have launched a new attempt to read your Bible consistently in 2025. Bravo. One of the best decisions you can make in 2025. Some of you have adopted a one-year plan. You're going to read through the Bible in 1 year. Fantastic. Others of you have adopted a devotional that you've heard about and you've ordered, and you're reading that every day. Whatever your plan is, fantastic. If you've adopted a one-year plan where you're trying to read the Bible in 1 year, if you get behind, it's okay. It's okay. We're not grading you at the end of the year. Nobody's grading you. It's okay. Slow down. Take it in smaller chunks. Catch up, whatever. It's okay. Just be in God's Word this year. If you adopted a one-year plan, however, chances are you've been in Genesis. In Genesis, it always helps us get a good start, right? We always start really strong with Genesis and maybe Exodus, and man, then Leviticus comes along, right? But Genesis, it's stories, it's characters. A lot of the characters you're familiar with, and then some characters you're unfamiliar with. But there's these big, grand stories in the book of Genesis, and some of the most well-known Bible characters. For example, Abraham, really big Old Testament character. Abraham has a son named Isaac. Isaac marries Rebekah. Rebekah gets pregnant and she has twins. She has twin boys. And the Bible tells us in Genesis 25 that these twin boys were jostling within her. Like while she was still pregnant, these boys were kind of going at it. Like there's kind of this theme that emerges even pre-birth of a bit of a rivalry, a bit of a tension between these two boys. So much so that Rebekah goes to God and says, God, what is going on? And the Bible doesn't tell us how he responded. It just tells us he did respond. And he said, you need to know that there's not just two boys in you, there's two nations. There's two groups of people. And they are somewhat going to be in competition a little bit. And then God tells Rebekah, the younger is, the older is going to serve the younger. In other words, the younger is going to be the leader ultimately. The younger is going to be the one that God fulfills his plan through. The younger is going to be the stronger, the out front, which culturally was counterintuitive because they were very strict. Firstborn had certain rights. Firstborn was the leader ultimately. But it wasn't unusual for God to choose the one that nobody else chose. Like everybody else picked A and God picked B. Very often when it comes to leaders, not the leader everybody thought should be the leader, or the one that looked like the leader, or the one that was born at the right time. God just in his sovereign choosing decided sometimes, no, I'm going to use the lesser. I'm going to use the younger. I'm going to use the weaker. That's the case. That's kind of the setup. We get a little bit more backstory in verse 24. This is Genesis 25, beginning in verse 24. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment, so they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Firstborn comes out, and he's hairy. So they name him a name that means hairy. Secondborn comes out. He's grabbing the heel of his older brother. As he comes out, he's grabbing the heel. So they named the secondborn a name that means grabbing the heel. They were very creative with names in the Old Testament. Now, the thing about this name, grabbing the heel, it was a euphemism, it was an idiom, it was a kind of a word play, and it didn't just mean grabbing the heel, it meant deceiver, trickster, scammer. Jacob, from very early on, gets this identity as scammer. If he ever called you on your cell phone, you wouldn't answer it because it would say, possible scam. That's Jacob. He's a deceiver. He's a trickster. The story continues, verse 27. The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Again, still backstory to the real story we're going to get to in just a moment. There's this ongoing rivalry. It starts in the womb. It is exacerbated, perhaps, because they're just different. If you've got two kids, whether they're twins or not, you know they're just not the same. And these two boys were different. Esau was outdoorsy, hunter, big game killer. Like he was an animal slayer. Like I said, he went out there and he killed game and cooked it. And as a matter of fact, his dad. This is why his dad loved him so much. His dad was like, yeah, he feeds me. Like, he brings me food, which we could do a whole deep dive into the transactional relationship between between Esau and Isaac that may have led to some of Esau's issues. We won't do that today. But Isaac said, yeah, he feeds me. He brings me food. This was Esau, outdoorsy kind of guy. Jacob was more of an organizer, kind of manager around the community, close to home, maybe managing like the shepherds or the farming. He was kind of overseer, right? He was management. Esau was out there doing the work. They were different. They didn't see eye to eye on things. Now, the NIV, what I read from, describes Jacob as content to stay at home among the tents. Most translations have two descriptions of Jacob that go something like this. He was a quiet man dwelling in tents. So they get the kind of the organizer, close to home manager type of person. But most translations more accurately have this, he was a quiet man. That phrase typically is used to describe a moral quality. It's saying Jacob was the morally superior. He was morally right. He was morally complete. That's how this phrase gets used in other places in the Bible. It has this high integrity matter to it. I'm not trying to give you trivial information here. What we know is Jacob is not that right now. He is not that at all. There is this complex, layered view of Jacob in these opening stories. He is not the man he is supposed to become. He is not yet the person he is supposed to be. And this is kind of the Bible's way of saying, look, he's supposed to be this, and you're going to figure out he is not that at all. Okay, here's the core of the story that we're diving into, verse 29. Once, when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished. That is why he was called Edom. Edom means red. And you remember, he was born red-headed and hairy, but he didn't get the red nickname until this moment. This is the moment that kind of stamps Esau and much of his future. This is the moment when people call him that nickname. This is what they're referring to. This moment and this decision followed Esau for the rest of his life. Verse 31, the deceiver, the scammer is there, and this is how he responds. Jacob replied, first, sell me your birthright. Look, I'm about to die, Esau said. What good is the birthright to me? But Jacob said, swear to me first. Let's make it official. So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. Esau comes in from the field, hungry, famished, asks for some lentil stew that Jacob's stirring there. Maybe he had made it. Being the scammer that he was, Jacob's not going to just give the stew away. Jacob's running through his mind, okay, what's the right price here? Like, what can I get out of this? How can I make this work in my favor? And he determines the price is Esau's birthright, which doesn't mean much to us. I mean, we understand inheritance. Birthright was something much more. Whenever Abraham died, whoever was entitled to the birthright became the leader of the family. They were the judge. They were the decision maker. There was no voting. It was not a democracy. Whatever they decided, that was the law. They became the leader of the family once the patriarch of the family was gone. This was a significant leadership role. And then sort of financially, materially, the firstborn was entitled to the birthright. And part of the birthright was a double portion of the inheritance. Now, there's 2 boys, so the math breaks down pretty simple. Esau would get 2/3 of his father's inheritance, and his father, along with his grandfather, were incredibly wealthy. Esau would get 2/3 of the inheritance. Jacob would get 1/3. And all of us can understand how this would bother a second-born. Especially if you were the second-born by seconds. You were holding on to that first kid on the way out, trying to get out first. I mean, you were that close to being the firstborn, and you have to see your brother get everything. It's not a stretch of the imagination to think Jacob had been thinking about this for a long time. Jacob knew what was coming. And this con man, this deceiver, had been thinking, okay, how do I get that for myself? And this was the moment. He finally had a moment where his older brother needed something from him, and he offers him a deal, and Esau says yes. Now, a couple things. What do we learn? As we're looking to 2025, as this is kind of the backdrop of what we're talking about here today, a couple suggestions. Number 1, pre-decide what our priorities are before we're faced with the choice. Don't wait till the stew's in front of you to decide. 2025, we're 5 days in. Don't make it up as you go along, friends. Don't make the big decisions of 2025 as you go along. Don't make the moral decisions. Don't make the decisions of your integrity. Don't make the spiritual decisions just as you go along. I know you can't possibly foresee all of the decisions that you're going to have to make, but the core decisions about who you are going to be and what is going to be the priority in your life, pre-decide. Pre-decide. This is what's going to be important to us in 2025. Maybe write them down. This is what's important to us. And don't approach this exercise from the standpoint of, well, here's all the things we have to do this year. Now, how can we fit in the important things around those things? Don't start there. Start by saying, God, what are the most important things about our lives in 2025? And everything else is going to fit around those. What are the most significant things? What are the most eternal things that need to happen in my life, in our family's life? What are the most significant eternal aspects of 2025? And then how do I make everything else work around it? And maybe some things have to go. Maybe I don't put in all the pieces this year because I put in the most important pieces first. Pre-decide. Get clarity. Here's why you need to do that. Because the moment of decision often distorts our priorities. The moment of decision. It distorts what is really important and what is not so important. When you're in the heat of the moment, you sometimes have a tendency to lose track of the value system. This whole story ends with a rather chilling statement. It's this statement. So Esau despised his birthright. This incredibly valuable gift to him, he forgot how valuable it was. He didn't treat it as precious. He didn't treat it as a good gift. He didn't treat it as a valuable gift. Instead, he despised. He got confused on what was important and unimportant in the heat of the moment. In the moment, it's not always so clear. That's why before we get to the moment, you and I need to pre-decide this is where our values are. This is where our heart is. This is what we will pursue in the new year. Here's why. The urgency and desires of the moment cause me to choose the immediate instead of the important. Even if I intellectually know what the important answer is, even if if you had paused this story and asked Esau, which is more valuable, stew or your birthright, he would have known the answer intellectually. But in the heat of the moment, the urgency of the decision, the desires and appetites that well up within us cause us to pick what's in front of us. Like in the moment, the stew looks really good. In the moment, the stew smells really good. It would be much easier to eat the stew than to pull back and think about this other valuable thing that I am giving away. And it's just so easy to make decisions based on now. The immediate. Well, this is what everyone's doing now. Well, this is the season of life we're in now. Well, this is what our kids want to do now. It is easy to build our whole life around what's happening right now. The bowl of stew that's in front of me right now. And we get this little window every year, this little window at the beginning of the year, where we could push back from the bowl and we could say, okay, let me accurately reflect on what matters most in this coming year. Here's a reality we face. The most important rarely feels like the most important until it's too late. The most important rarely feels like the most important until it's too late. The next thing on the calendar usually feels like the most important. The next place we have to get our kids usually feels like the most important. The next deadline usually feels like the most important. The actual most important, the eternal, the really valuable, typically doesn't feel like the most important until it's too late. The stew looks most important. The bowl looks most important. Something else Esau teaches us. Our appetites get exaggerated in the moment. What we think we want, our desires, they get exaggerated. They get out of proportion. If you're a parent, has your child ever told you they were starving? Were they starving? No. Have they ever been starving? No. Can they spell starving? No. Starving has no connection to their reality whatsoever. But in the moment, I'm starving. Oh, I'm starving. Just one example. We do it all the time, though. In the moment, it feels urgent. It feels now. It feels like I need to do this. Our appetites, our desires, they get exaggerated. Esau comes in from the field and he's famished. Okay, he's hungry. I get it. He's hungry. He's been hunting, hadn't had time to eat. I totally get it. But then he follows the I'm hungry, I'm famished with I'm gonna die. Is he going to die? No, he's not going to die. He would make it a few more minutes. He would make it a few more hours, probably a few more days. And in that moment of exaggeration, he changes the value system. I'm going to exchange this thing that's really, really valuable for this thing that is so fleeting and so temporary and so meaningless. And you and I, we see it clearly in other people, don't we? We see it so clearly in somebody else. You've even said it. You said it to a friend. You said it to a coworker. You said it to your spouse. I cannot believe he traded everything in his life away for that. I can't believe it. I can't believe she traded everything away for that. I can't believe they made that decision that cost them their future. They gave this away for that. We see it so clearly when it's other people. We see it so clearly in this story. I can't believe he would do that. That's one of the reasons we have trouble taking stories like this seriously. Because it's so obvious. And let's be honest, it wasn't even good stew. It was lentil stew. Apologies to those of you who like lentil stew. I will allow for that. You will never convince me that Esau the hunter, who killed things, cooked it over an open fire, had that nice smoky taste, nice sear on the outside, so you get a little bit of crunch, and then you get the juice. You will never convince me that guy was satisfied by lentil stew. It wasn't even good stew. It's possible for us to do the same thing. It smells so good. It's now. It's right there. I'm going to do it. It's not even good stew. It's not even satisfying to us. In the moment, it was the pleasure, there was the good of the moment. And then we look back and, why did I do that? We get this easy, simple little example. If you have an Apple phone, once a week, I don't know if everybody's comes on Sunday morning. Mine comes on Sunday morning, which I hate. Once a week, you get a notification of how many hours you were on your phone. You get it, unless you've turned it off. I don't even want to see that. I get it once a week. Boop. You know what I never do? I never go, man, that was such satisfying hours I spent on my phone every day. Those 5 hours, 6, those 4 hours, whatever it is for you. Those, man, that was just filling to me. But in the moment, I'm reaching, and I'm scrolling, I'm reaching, and then once a week, I get a reminder, lentil stew, buddy. Lentil stew. In bigger and smaller ways, all of us face this in our lives. Smells so good, tastes so good. I want it now. And it's just not satisfying. We see it in other people's lives. We see it in Esau's life. Here's what I want to suggest. The Bible gives us this obvious story as a reminder that it's not so obvious when it's us. I know this is an obvious story. It seems like a child story. Like, who would do that? It's such an obvious story. But I think God's trying to wake us up to the fact that, yeah, it's obvious in Esau's life. It's obvious in everybody else's life. But when the stew is sitting in front of you, it's not as obvious anymore. You are just as big a sucker as everybody else if you're not careful. You are just as likely to trade away what is really valuable and really important as Esau was. Now, I'm not going to let Jacob off the hook. We give Esau a hard time, rightly so. I'm not going to let Jacob off the hook because he is deceiving and scamming to get what God has already told him he was going to get. Jacob is impatient with God. He's trying to manipulate things. He's not trusting God. He's trying to fast forward things. God has already told Jacob, you're the guy. You're going to be my leader. You're going to rule over your brother. God's already at work. God's already doing this. God is already accomplishing this. He just wasn't accomplishing it fast enough for Jacob. And so Jacob says, I'm going to make this work. Jacob is trying to deceive his way into what God had already promised him. He's trying to manipulate his way into what God was already doing in his life. And some of us need to hear the side of Esau. Some of us need to be warned that you're going to sit in front of a valueless bowl of stew all throughout this year and be tempted to trade away the eternal, the valuable, the meaningful. Some of us need to be reminded, let God do his work in 2025. Let him cook, as we say. Let him cook. Let God do his work. Some of us are so anxious. God, do it now. God, open it now. God, make it happen. Don't be Jacob. God has promised to be at work in you. If you are his child, he is at work. He has a future plan. He is guiding you to that future. He's going to open doors. And when he opens doors, go through them. Like, live expectantly. I'm not saying live lazy and don't do anything. Live expectantly. Believe God is at work, but some of us need to hear, I don't need to try to fast forward God's work in me this year. God does so much of his work slowly and methodically. And God tries to get us ready for what he has. This is not the last time Jacob was going to deceive and Jacob was going to have these confrontations with God until his heart began to change. Don't need that in your life in 2025. Walk faithfully. Walk expectantly. Worship God. Dig into his word. Follow him close. Draw closer to his heart. Don't get frustrated with how slowly God's moving. Don't get frustrated that you don't have it now. God's at work. Let God work in 2025. Because this whole life, friends, you're going to go forwards and backwards, just like I am. You're going to go up sometimes, you're going to go down sometimes. You're going to roll the die, you're going to get a good roll sometimes. You're going to get a bad roll sometimes. You're going to get some good answers. And you're like me, you're going to guess some wrong answers. And you're probably going to have a few wild guesses along the way. And every time you're filling up your life. Now notice, there's a limited amount of space here. There's a limited amount of space in your life the next 360 days. You can't put all of it in here. You can't do everything. Will you do the most important things? Will you value the most important things? Or will you pick the stew? Your choice. God, we have 360 days stretching out in front of us. We have an untold amount of decisions and choices, moments of temptation, moments of pressure, moments of discouragement. Help us to say yes to you. Yes to the birthright, the goodness that you are trying to give us. The promises that you are trying to lead us into. Help us not to short circuit those, but to walk faithfully, surrendered to you, glorying in, rejoicing in the goodness that you want to do in us, that you would be glorified, that we would serve well in the kingdom. And God, where there is someone, maybe even right now, sitting in front of a bowl of stew, about to throw it all away, pull them back from that moment. Wake them up. Wake their heart up. Wake their mind up to your love for them and the value that they're throwing away. I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.